Shortest job first scheduling algorithm. In shortest job first scheduling algorithm, the policy is to pick a process from the ready queue that has shortest CPU burst length. Ready queue may have more than one processes, and when this is the case, we must select a process from the ready queue for allocation on CPU. So under shortest job first scheduling algorithm, the selection criterion is to select a process whose burst length is shortest as compared to the other processes in the ready queue. SJF associates with each process the length of the process next CPU burst. This means in this algorithm, each process has corresponding CPU burst length, the length of the next CPU burst. What is CPU burst? CPU burst is the time when the process will be executing on the CPU. You may recall from the last lecture on CPU burst and IO burst cycle that a process execution is composed of two stages, CPU burst cycle and IO burst cycle. And a process execution alternates between these two stages. In CPU burst cycle, process will be using the CPU, whereas in IO burst cycle, process will be waiting for the completion of IO request. It will not be using the CPU. And because process execution alternates between these two cycles, CPU burst cycle and IO burst cycle, process will start its execution with CPU burst cycle. And this CPU burst cycle will be followed by an IO burst cycle. And the IO burst cycle will be again followed by the CPU burst cycle. That will be followed by the IO burst cycle. So this cycle continues until there is a final CPU burst cycle that terminates the program execution. So what SJF does, while a process will be running in a particular CPU burst cycle, SJF will associate the length of the next CPU burst cycle with the process. And CPU is allocated to the process that has smallest next CPU burst. Because in ready queue, there might be more than one processes, and each process will have associated next CPU burst length. So using shortest job first scheduling, processor will be allocated to that process that has smallest next CPU burst length. If the next CPU burst length is same for two different processes, then use FCFS to break the tie. This means that it might be the case that ready queue has two processes which have same burst length. And when this is the case, then first come, first served scheduling policy is used to break the tie between these two processes. That process will be selected for execution that has arrived first in the ready queue. There are two versions of the shortest job first scheduling algorithm, non-preemptive version and preemptive version. In non-preemptive version, CPU cannot be taken back from a process unless process releases the CPU itself. This means in non-preemptive variant, if a process has been allocated CPU, then we cannot take the CPU back from this process forcefully. Process will release the CPU itself, either at the end of its execution or if it goes into the waiting state due to some IO request. The second variant of the shortest of first algorithm is preemptive variant. In preemptive variant, CPU can be taken away from a process based on some condition. This means if a process is running on the CPU, we can take the CPU back from this process based on some condition. For example, in SGF algorithm, the condition might be that the new process that has arrived in the system, it has shortest burst length as compared to the running process. So based on this condition, we might take the CPU back from the process. Let's take an example to better understand the SGF algorithm. Suppose there are 4 processes that have arrived at the same time in the system. Process P1, P2, P3, P4. These processes have arrived at time 0 in the system. Each process has associated burst time, that how long it will be executing on the CPU. Like process P1 will execute for 6 milliseconds. Process P2 will execute on the CPU for 8 milliseconds, and so on. This is the Gantt chart that explains the schedule of these processes on the system using SGF policy. Because at time 0, there are 4 processes in the ready queue. And while using SGF, we will select a process from the ready queue for allocation on the CPU based on the condition that process should have shortest burst time. So among these processes, among these 4 processes, process P4 has the shortest burst time. So this process will be selected for execution on CPU. So at time 0, process P4 will be selected and it will start executing in the CPU. This process will complete its execution at time 3. Now, again, we have to select another process to allocate it CPU. Now we have 3 processes in the ready queue: process P1, P2, and P3. And that process will be selected whose burst time is the shortest among these 3. So P1 has the shortest burst time as compared to the burst time of process P2 and P3. So P1 will be selected for the execution on CPU. Its PCB will be removed from the ready queue and P1 will be allocated CPU. So P1 will start its execution at time 3 and it will finish its execution at time 9. Now again, we have to select another process so it could run on CPU. Now we have to make choice between process P2 and P3 because these are the 2 processes in the ready queue now. And we will select a process with the shortest burst time. So process P3 will be selected and it will start execution at time 9 and it will finish its execution at time 16. After this, there will be only one process in the ready queue, that is the process P2. So this process will be selected and it will start its execution on the CPU and it will finish its execution at time 24. By looking at the Gantt chart, we can find out the completion time for each of these processes. Process P1 has completed its execution at time 9. Process P2 has completed its execution at time 24. Process P3 has completed its execution at time 16. And P4 has completed its execution at time 3. Likewise, we can again use the Gantt chart to find out the waiting time for each of these processes, because each of these processes have arrived at the same time, at time t0. So we can use Gantt chart easily to obtain the waiting time for each of these processes. By looking at the Gantt chart, we will find that process P1, this process started its execution at time 3. This means P1 has been waiting for 3 time units at 3 milliseconds in the ready queue. So the waiting time for P1 will be 3 milliseconds. Now again, looking at the Gantt chart, we can find that process P2 started its execution at time 16. This means this process has been waiting for 16 milliseconds for 16 time units in the ready queue. And so is the case with process P3 that started its execution at time 9. So this has been waiting for the 9 milliseconds in the ready queue. Process P4, it started its execution at time 0. So this process didn't wait in the ready queue because it arrived at the ready queue at time 0, and at the same time it was allocated the CPU. So the waiting time for this process is 0. We can compute the average waiting time by adding up all the waiting times for each of these processes, and then by dividing this sum with the total number of processes in the set, and we will get the value 7. 7 is the average waiting time for the processes in this set. Shortest remaining time first algorithm. SRTF is the preemptive variant of SJF. Whenever a new process arrives in the ready queue, the scheduling decision is retaken using the SJF algorithm. So what we do in SRTF algorithm, whenever a new process arrives in the ready queue, we will retake the scheduling decision. Why we will retake this decision? The assumption is that this newly admitted process might have the burst length which is shorter as compared to the burst length as compared to the remaining burst length of the currently running process. So if this is the case, then we will select this new process for execution in CPU. So what we do in this algorithm, whenever a new process arrives in the ready queue, we will compare the remaining burst time of currently running process with the burst time of this newly admitted process. And we will preempt the running process if the new process has burst length shorter than the remaining burst length of the running process. This means preempt the running process. This means CPU will be taken back from the currently running process if the new process has burst length shorter than the remaining burst length of the running process. Because process currently running process already has computed or completed some of its execution. So it has completed a part of its burst length, while still there is the remaining part of the burst length that it needs to complete. Hence, we will compare this remaining burst length with the burst length of the newly admitted process. And if the remaining burst length is greater than the burst length of the newly admitted process, then we will preempt the currently running process. Then run the process with the shortest next burst length. So based on this if condition, we will select the process for execution on the CPU. Let's take an example to consider the case of shortest remaining time first scheduling approach. Suppose there are 4 processes in the system that have arrived at different times. Process P1 has arrived at time 0, P2 has arrived at time 1, process P3 has arrived at time 2, and process P4 arrived at time 3. Each process has corresponding burst time that defines that how long it will be executing on the CPU. Gantt chart explains the schedule of these processes using shortest remaining time first policy. At time 0, there is only one process in the system, that is process P1. So this is the only process in the ready queue. So SRTF will select this process for execution on CPU. So process P1 will start its execution at time 0. At time 1, while process P1 was still running in the CPU, at time 1, a new process P2 has arrived in the ready queue. When a new process will arrive in the ready queue, what we will do? We will compare the burst time of this newly admitted process with the remaining burst time of the currently running process. So the burst time of the process P2 is 4. And what is the remaining burst time of process P1, which is currently running in the CPU? That would be 7. Remember, this is not 8 because process P1 is already running in the CPU. And at time 1, it has completed a part of its burst time. Its total burst time was 8 milliseconds. At time 1, it has completed 1 millisecond. So the remaining burst length for process P1 will be 7. So we will compare 4 with 7. Obviously, 4 is smaller than the 7. So process P2 will be selected for execution on the CPU. We will preempt the process P1. So P1 will be, it will be taken, we will take back the CPU from process P1 and we will put this process P1 back in the ready queue. And process P2 will be given the control of CPU. So at time 1, process P2 will start executing on the CPU. While process P2 is running on the CPU, another process, process P3, arrives in the system at time 2. So we will compare the running time or the burst time of this newly admitted process with the remaining burst time of process which is currently running in the CPU. So we will compare the burst time of process P3 with the remaining burst time of process P2. The burst time of process P3 is 9, whereas the remaining burst time of process P2 at time 2 is 3. Why it is 3? Because this process started its execution at time 1, and at time 2, process P2 has completed 1 millisecond of its total burst time. So the remaining burst time for process P2 at time 2 is 3. So we will compare 3 and 9. Now, the burst time of newly admitted process is greater than the remaining burst time of currently running process. So we will not preempt the currently running process. It will keep running on the CPU. So it will keep running on the CPU, and while it is still executing, another process, process P4, arrives in the ready queue at time 3. So we will again compare the burst time of process P4 with the remaining burst time of process P2. So what is the remaining burst time of process P2 at time 3? That would be 2, because process P2 started its execution at time 1, and at time 3 its remaining burst time will be 2. So we will compare 2 with the burst time of the newly admitted process, that is 5. Obviously 2 is less than 5, so we will not preempt the currently running process. P2 will keep running on the CPU. So P2 will complete its execution at time 5. And when it will complete its execution, we will go back to the ready queue and we will pick a process with the shortest burst time. Now there are 3 processes in the ready queue. Process P1 with the burst time 7, process P3 with the burst time 9, and process P4 with the burst time 5. So process P4 has the shortest burst time. So this process will be selected for execution and it will be running on the CPU now. This process will complete its execution at time 10, after which we will again refer to the ready queue. Now there are 2 processes in the ready queue, process P1 and process P3. The burst time of process P3 is 9, while the burst time for process P1 is 7, because it has already completed 1 millisecond of its total burst time. Obviously, the burst time of process P1 is smallest as compared to the burst time of process P3, so P1 will be allocated the CPU. P1 will release the CPU at time 17, and then process P3 is the only process in the ready queue. So this process will be selected for execution, and this process will complete its execution at time 26. By looking at the Gantt chart, we can determine the completion time for each of these processes. Process P1 completed its execution at time 17. P2 completed its execution at time 5. P3 completed its execution at time 26. And finally, P4 completed its execution at time 10. From the completion time, we can find out the turnaround time. And what is turnaround time? Turnaround time is the time duration when the process arrived in the ready queue, starting from this moment till the completion of this process. This time interval is known as turnaround time. So to compute the turnaround time, what we have to do, we have to subtract the arrival time of the respective process from its completion time. And once we have found the turnaround time, we have computed the values for turnaround time, we can compute the waiting time for each of these processes. And how we can compute the waiting time? Waiting time can be computed by subtracting the burst time from the turnaround time. So these are the equations that can be used to compute the turnaround time and waiting time. Remember, waiting time is the time when the process has been waiting in the ready queue for the allocation of CPU. And likewise, we can compute the average waiting time, that is 6.5 for these four processes. So what are the strengths of the SGF algorithm? SGF algorithm is optimal. This means this policy gives the minimum average waiting time for a given set of processes. In the last lecture, we have discussed the FCFS policy, and we discussed that FCFS policy gives the waiting time that is not minimum, that is quite long. So as compared to that algorithm, SGF is optimal. It gives minimum average waiting time for a given set of processes. Why it gives minimum average waiting time? Because SGF selects the shortest process for allocation on CPU. Hence, it gives the minimum average waiting time for all the processes in the particular set. SRTF is more optimal than SGF. This means the preemptive version of this algorithm is more optimal as compared to the non-preemptive version. And why preemptive version is more optimal? Because whenever a new process arrives in the ready queue, we compare its burst length with the remaining burst length of the currently running process. And by doing so, it is guaranteed that we will select a process for execution that has shortest burst length. Hence, SRTF gives more optimal or minimum average waiting time as compared to the non-preemptive version of this algorithm. What are the limitations of this algorithm? This algorithm cannot be implemented for short-term scheduling. This means we cannot use SCF or SRTF for CPU scheduling. Why can't we use this algorithm for short-term scheduling or CPU scheduling? Because there is no way to know the length of the next CPU burst. So this is the real challenge in this algorithm, that how we can determine the length of the next CPU burst. Because in advance, without executing the process, how can we say that what would be the length of the next CPU burst cycle? So this is the real difficulty in this algorithm. So how could we know the length of the next CPU burst? First solution is ask the user. SGF can be used for long-term scheduling in batch environment. And in batch environment, a user is required to submit his job for execution to the operator. So when a user will submit his job for the execution, user will specify that how much time this job will be needed on the CPU. And if user gives the accurate execution time for his job, the response time will be better for the user. And if user provides inaccurate value for the execution time of his job, in that case, time limit exceeded error will occur and user will have to resubmit the job. The second approach is estimate the next CPU burst length. So what we do in this estimation approach, we try to approximate the SGF scheduling. We expect that the next CPU burst will be similar in length to the previous ones because, as I said earlier, process execution alternates between a cycle of CPU burst and IO burst. So we can, by looking at the previous CPU burst cycles, we can make an estimate that what would be the length of the next CPU burst, but it would be an approximation. We may be right or we may be wrong in our estimate. So by computing an approximation of the length of the next CPU burst, we can determine the length of the next CPU burst cycle.